Welcome in, and thank you for joining us today. We've got a profoundly moving deep dive lined up for you.
You really do.
We are looking at a deeply personal, first-hand account written by a former Texas highway patrolman. His name is Ben English.
Right.
And he documented a defining, just tragic moment in his career. And through his recollection, we're going to explore the raw human reality of wearing a badge.
Yeah, and the hidden costs that are borne by the families waiting at home, too.
Exactly. Plus the complex legacy that one sudden loss leaves behind.
It is such an essential piece of writing to examine because, it bridges the gap between abstract data and human experience.
Definitely.
So often discussions about line-of-duty deaths, they revolve around statistics or liability or just names etched into a granite memorial wall.
Yeah, it becomes very clinical.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But this source material strips away that sterile distance. It offers a visceral study in grief and the fueled bonds of this unspoken brotherhood.
And the ripples in a pond effect, right?
Yes, the profound echoing impact that one life and one loss can have on an entire community. It really challenges the standard narratives we consume about law enforcement and trauma.
Okay, let's unpack this by setting the scene. Because the contrast the author paints right at the start is staggering.
It really is.
It's the Saturday afternoon of May 19th, 1990. The author, Ben, is way out of his usual West Texas territory.
He's down in Austin, right?
Yeah, in Austin on a special detail. President George H.W. Bush is giving the commencement speech for the University of Texas graduating class.
So it's a huge event.
Huge event, but Ben is just tasked with outer perimeter security. It's this highly visible suit and tie assignment, but the reality of the task is just standing on a line in the heat.
Trying to look sharp.
Trying to look sharp and essentially doing nothing. It is utterly routine, almost boring.
And the mundane nature of that assignment serves as the perfect foil for the news that's about to arrive.
Yeah.
You have an officer lulled into the rhythm of a secure, heavily monitored environment. The perimeter is locked down, the threat level feels low.
His primary challenge is just staying awake through a graduation ceremony.
Right. It highlights how tragedy rarely announces itself. It simply shatters the quietest moments.
So it's around 3 p.m. Ben has been separated from his usual partner, L.D. Witten.
And Ben describes LD vividly.
Oh, I love this description. He says L.D. is the kind of guy who would fight a tornado with a feather.
That paints quite a picture.
It really does. So Ben is standing on the west side security line when this unnamed lieutenant approaches him.
And the lieutenant doesn't pull him aside or anything.
No preliminary comfort at all. He just walks up and asks, "Do you know a Willie Dale Taylor?"
And Ben replies, "Yes, sir. He's our corporal in Ozona."
Right. And the lieutenant bluntly states, well, not anymore. He was killed about 30 minutes ago.
Just like that.
Just like that. And then he turns and walks away.
Wow. Looking at that moment, what's fascinating here is the sheer mechanics of the institutional response.
It's so cold.
Completely devoid of empathy. You have a young officer who has just been informed that his friend and mentor, a corporal who had been on the highway patrol since 1962, is dead.
And the protocol of the moment dictates that neither Ben nor his partner, LD, are pulled off their posts.
Right. There's no operational pivot to send them home to grieve, or even just to take a breather.
They just have to stand there.
They are expected to absorb this life-altering trauma, remain slack-jawed on a security perimeter, and finish out their detail. It perfectly illustrates how massive bureaucracies prioritize immediate operational protocol over human needs.
And the psychological dissonance of having to stand at attention while your mind is 300 miles away in West Texas, it's brutal.
Ben can't even fully process it.
No, his immediate reaction is denial. He assumes there has to be a mistake. It takes an hour and a half before he finally gets rotated off the line for a standard break.
And he immediately scrambles to find a payphone.
Yeah, he places a collect call to his wife, Kathy, back in Ozona. He's desperate for someone to tell him it's a mix-up.
But the confirmation he receives is devastating.
Kathy confirms the worst.
She does. Willie Dale was killed just west of the Pandale Overpass. His Mustang patrol unit was struck from the rear by a commercial truck.
And here is where the layers of this tragedy compound almost immediately. The narrative shifts from a workplace casualty to a deeply intimate trauma.
Because of a horrifying twist of fate.
Exactly. Kathy, along with Ben's sister-in-law, Lori, had been traveling to Fort Lancaster for a local festival. Out of pure coincidence, they were among the very first people to arrive at the crash site.
And the sensory details Ben relays from their experience are haunting.
When Kathy and Lori pulled up, the dust from the impact was literally still settling in the air.
Because the sheer physics of the crash are difficult to comprehend, the commercial truck had essentially run over the top of the Mustang patrol unit.
The impact was so violently severe that it snapped Willie Dale's safety belt
And propelled him out of the vehicle. Kathy scrambled out of her car into this chaotic, dust-choked environment and found Willie Dale lying face down on the highway.
And we have to remember the era and the geography here. This is 1990 in rural Texas.
Right, there are no cell phones.
None. The burden of action falls entirely on whoever is physically present.
Which means Kathy had to leave the scene, get back in her car, and drive to the Department of Public Safety office in Ozona to physically report the tragedy.
To the dispatchers. And the HUME element of that office makes the task unimaginably heavy.
One of the dispatchers on duty that afternoon, R.B. Babbitt, was Willie Dale's best friend.
And the other dispatcher, Frank Galvin, it was his very first day behind the console.
Kathy had to walk through those doors and be the one to shatter their reality.
You think about the sheer emotional weight of what Kathy was carrying in that moment. And it becomes even heavier when you learn she was 5 months pregnant.
It is a profound psychological burden. And it perfectly sets the stage for the ideological clash that happens next.
Back in Austin.
Right. Ben's phone break ends. He has to return to the perimeter and work on autopilot for the rest of the day.
Until they're finally relieved around 9 o'clock that night.
And the tension between the administration's rigid liability protocols and the unspoken brotherhood of the officers is about to rupture.
The officers load onto a bus to head back to DPS headquarters, and the top brass issues an absolute, non-negotiable decree.
Everyone is to stay at the academy dormitory for the night.
Under no circumstances is any officer to drive back to their home stations.
And Ben hears this order, sitting on that bus, and his internal response is simply, "You'll play hell, keeping me from it."
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this rebellion is so revealing.
It reveals a fierce, familial loyalty that entirely supersedes bureaucratic mandates. Because from an administrative standpoint, the order makes logical sense.
Liability, right. They don't want an exhausted, traumatized trooper driving hundreds of miles in the dark.
Potentially causing another tragedy. But Ben is operating on a completely different frequency. He's looking at a fractured community and a traumatized wife back in Ozona who desperately need him.
Protocol is irrelevant in the face of that duty. He informs LD of his intentions. LD gives him a stern warning, telling him the brass will hang him if they find out he went AWOL.
And Ben's response is just 2 words: let him.
Let him. He grabs his gear, marches right past a head-shaking LD, tosses his bags into his personal Dodge, and drives 3 hours through the pitch-black Texas night.
He pulls into his driveway in Ozona to find Kathy awake, waiting for him. They sit up talking until the sun finally rises.
That act of defiance is a testament to where his true allegiance lies. But the depth of this law enforcement brotherhood is revealed even more over the next few days.
Particularly through the actions of the area sergeant Glenn Redmond.
Glenn is thrust into an impossible administrative and emotional meat grinder.
He's an old-school road troop. He had already survived the trauma of losing a good friend, Sammy Long, who was murdered on a traffic stop years prior.
Now he's managing Willie Dale's death while simultaneously running his entire territory, fielding a mountain of inquiries and processing benefit applications.
Ben observes that Glenn absorbed all this immense strain, specifically to give his grieving men a breather.
The afternoon following the funeral, Glenn calls his officers together. He tells them they've done all they can do, instructs them to go home to their families, and assures them that neighboring units will handle any calls.
It seems like a moment of reprieve, but Ben gets a premonition. He intuitively knows that Glenn is planning to undertake something terrible completely alone.
Because the bureaucracy processes the paperwork of a tragedy, but someone has to manage the physical, often gruesome reality left behind.
Ben doesn't go home to rest. He changes into a worn-out pair of cutoffs, an old t-shirt, and tennis shoes.
He grabs a bucket and some scrub brushes, gets into his own car, and drives out to the secured local wrecking yard where Willie Dale's destroyed Mustang is being stored.
And a few minutes after Ben arrives, Sergeant Redmond pulls up.
Dressed in the exact same manner, carrying his own bucket and supplies.
Redmond looks at Ben and asks, "What are you doing here?" And Ben simply replies, "Same thing you are."
What follows is one of the most powerful scenes in the entire account. For the next 2 hours, in complete and absolute silence, these 2 men scrubbed the blood and the physical remains out of Willie Dale's wrecked patrol car.
They have to sanitize the vehicle so a department wrecker can transport it to its final destination in Austin. It is the ultimate act of reverence.
They're undertaking the ugliest, most psychologically scarring job imaginable simply because it has to be done.
And neither man is willing to let his brother shoulder that burden alone. It's a masterclass in silent leadership from Redmond.
Showing up in the trenches when institutional protocols fall short.
And for Ben, it's a voluntary descent into the trauma to protect his sergeant. The aftermath of this silent task takes on an almost ritualistic quality.
Ben returns home, walks out into his backyard, and digs a shallow grave.
He throws in the cutoffs, the rags, and the scrub
He
brushes.
sets them on fire, completely incinerating everything he wore during that task. He then buries the ashes and fills the hole back in.
It's his way of compartmentalizing the horror so he can continue to function. Because the very next morning, Ben is back in full uniform, walking into Sergeant Redmond's office.
And the dynamic between them has fundamentally shifted overnight. Redmond looks up at his officer and asks, "Ben, what do I do now?"
And Ben replies, "I think you've done all you could, Sarge. Now it's time to grieve."
When Ben walks back out to his car, the realization hits him. Redmond no longer looks at him as just a rookie.
Having shared that silent, horrific duty in the wrecking yard, Redmond now views Ben as an experienced road trip.
It's a tragic coming of age, baptized by the grim realities of the job.
He really is.
But the fallout extends beyond the precinct. And here's where it gets really interesting, or rather profoundly revealing about the unseen costs of this profession.
We have to shift our focus to the people who never put on a uniform.
Right, because the trauma doesn't respect the boundary of the badge. The invisible toll on Ben's wife, Kathy, is severe. As we noted, she was 5 months pregnant.
And Willie Dale was the very first dead man she ever seen in her life. The psychological shockwaves manifested physically.
The trauma of discovering that crash scene nearly pushed Kathy into premature labor with their second son, Ethan.
The medical intervention required her to spend the entire next month on strict bed rest at her parents' home in Cristobal.
Because Ozona was 84 miles away from the nearest hospital in San Angelo, her doctor simply could not risk her staying so far from emergency medical care.
That isolation, lying in bed for a month, separated from her husband, alone with her thoughts, amplified the mental anguish.
Ben writes that for a long time afterward, the trauma fundamentally altered her reality. When Kathy closed her eyes, she would hallucinate.
Instead of seeing Willie Dale lying there on the highway, she saw her own husband. She saw Ben dead on the asphalt.
Ben admits that if he could magically erase just one single memory from his wife's mind after all their years together, it would undoubtedly be what she witnessed that afternoon.
This specific collateral damage leads to one of the most uncompromising passages in the source material.
The warning.
Yes, the author issues a stark warning to you, the reader, and particularly to anyone contemplating a career in law enforcement.
He actively dismantles the Hollywood myth of the stoic lone wolf cop who shoulders the darkness of the world by himself.
He articulates that the moment you swear that oath and pin on that badge, your family involuntarily becomes drafted into the exact same risks.
He strips away all the romanticized notions. He states clearly that no matter how an officer tries to rationalize it, they are putting their family at an elevated risk, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually.
An officer volunteered for the danger. The family only followed along with the program.
Ben concludes this warning with a brutal dose of reality, advising recruits to always keep their career options open, because finding another job is considerably easier than finding another family.
It's a sobering analysis of the law enforcement ecosystem. Society asks these officers to confront the darkest, most chaotic elements of human nature on our behalf.
But we rarely acknowledge that their spouses, their children, and their loved ones act as the involuntary shock absorbers for that accumulated trauma.
Kathy never signed up to discover a mangled patrol car on a sunny Saturday, yet she bore the psychological scars of that reality just as deeply as any officer in the department.
It forces a deep appreciation for the silent sacrifices made within those households. But as we move forward in the timeline, Ben introduces a beautiful metaphor to describe the long-term aftermath.
The ripples in the pond.
Yes. He likens Willie Dale's sudden death to a pebble tossed into a still pond, with the ripples extending outward, influencing events for decades to come.
Willie Dale was gone, but the specific philosophies he taught Ben formed a curriculum for the future.
Ben eventually transitioned into a role as an instructor at the DPS Academy. Over his tenure, he came into contact with thousands of new recruits.
And he made it his personal mission to pass along the exact wisdom Willie Dale had imparted to him.
What's striking is that these lessons weren't about tactical maneuvers or penal codes. They were deeply human, empathetic philosophies on how to properly police a community.
The adages he passed down are timeless.
One core rule was, be as nice to others as you possibly can until it's no longer possible to be nice.
Another critical lesson was a reminder about perspective. Most folks you pull over on the highway aren't inherently bad people.
They're just having a bad day.
Exactly. And seeing the flashing lights of the highway patrol in their rearview mirror is the absolute last thing they needed. There is a profound humility in that approach.
Willie Dale also used to tell Ben, you can train a monkey to write a ticket.
The underlying point is that the mechanical, administrative functions of the job are the easy part.
It's the intangible skills, the discretion, the empathy, the split-second intuition when approaching a vehicle in the dead of night.
That's what differentiates a mere ticket writer from a true Texas highway patrolman. It's an ethos centered on service rather than mere enforcement.
Yet the most crucial lesson Willie Dale ever taught Ben carried a devastating, bitter irony.
Willie Dale constantly hammered home the dangers of the road itself.
Warning, Ben, watch traffic, watch traffic, watch traffic. Traffic will kill you quicker than any bullet will.
And the horrific reality is that Willie Dale died in exactly that manner.
It was a 1 in a million scenario. A rear-end collision by a commercial truck where every single variable went wrong in a matter of seconds.
That specific tragedy transformed Willie Dale's everyday advice into a literal lifeline for Ben.
He describes that warning as a voice from the grave.
Throughout the rest of his career, whenever Ben was conducting a traffic contact or parked vulnerable on the shoulder of the highway, he would hear Willie Dale's voice urging him to watch his back.
He would reflexively check his mirrors to monitor the approaching vehicles, and he explicitly notes that relying on that ingrained habit absolutely saved his life on multiple occasions.
The ripple effect of Willie Dale's mentorship literally kept subsequent generations of officers alive.
And those ripples manifested in physical ways across the community as well. Less than a month after the crash, a Texas Department of Highways supervisor named George Ibarra took it upon himself to have a marker made,
placing it along the fence line adjacent to the exact spot where Willie Dale died.
And the momentum didn't stop there. About 6.5 years later, a private citizen named Richard Metcalf spearheaded a campaign to get an official, permanent stone memorial erected and dedicated at the DPS office in Ozona.
The interconnectedness of these memorials is a story in itself.
Right. Richard Metcalf was originally inspired to begin this crusade after a personal interaction with a different trooper, a man named Carlos Warren.
Metcalf was pulled over by Warren and was so thoroughly impressed by the trooper's professionalism and demeanor that he never forgot it.
When Trooper Warren was later murdered while on patrol, Metcalf was moved to have a monument placed at the site of his death.
During that process, Metcalf realized that several other fallen DPS officers in the region had never been properly memorialized.
He made it his personal mission to rectify that oversight, which directly led to the creation of Willie Dale's stone monument.
It is the perfect illustration of those overlapping ripples in the pond.
When that stone monument was officially dedicated, Ben was chosen to deliver the speech to the assembled crowd.
By that time, Ben was an area corporal. He was holding the exact same rank and the exact same position that Willie Dale held when he was killed.
Standing at that podium, looking out at Willie Dale's family and the community, Ben chose to quote the 19th century writer Charles Kingsley.
He told the crowd, "The men whom I have seen succeed have always been cheerful and hopeful, who went about their business with a smile on their faces and took the changes and chances of this mortal life like men."
Ben noted that no quote could ring more true when summarizing the life and character of Willie Dale Taylor.
It is a remarkable tribute to a man who clearly defined what it meant to serve his community with grace and good humor.
Which brings the narrative full circle to the present day of the text, allowing us to witness the final ripple of this specific story.
Ben is finally reaching the end of his career and retiring.
He and Kathy are preparing to move away from Ozona after nearly 30 years, relocating back home to the Big Bend area.
As he's getting his affairs in order and his house ready to sell, he receives a call from his very last rookie, a man named Ryan Dalton.
Ryan asks to borrow Ben for a few hours. Now, Ryan is no longer a green recruit. He's a veteran trooper himself, a respected firearms instructor, a husband, and a father.
Ryan arrives in his black and white Tahoe, picks Ben up, and they drive out together to Interstate 10 West.
Ryan turns to his former training officer and says, "Years ago, you took me to the marker for Corporal Taylor. I want you to show me again so I can remember for sure."
They pull over and hike through the dense mesquite and cedar until they locate that original weathered marker that George Ibarra had placed against the fence line decades earlier.
Ryan begins asking detailed questions about the events of that day a quarter of a century prior.
Ben answers him, standing there in the brush, with one foot in his present retirement and the other firmly planted in the heavy memories of 1990.
As Ben eventually watches Ryan drive away in his patrol unit, a profound realization washes over him.
He sees that Ryan is a thoroughly good man, possessing a rare, quiet integrity.
The torch hasn't just been passed, it has been placed in incredibly capable, confident hands.
Willie Dale Taylor was statistically the 66th DPS officer to die in the line of duty, but his legacy was far more than a number.
He was the initial catalyst that directly shaped a lineage of better, more compassionate, and significantly safer officers.
Watching Ryan drive away, this raises an important question about totality and legacy.
Yeah.
So what does this all mean for the rest of us who don't wear a badge? The overarching narrative here proves that while we rarely have any control over the chaotic, often tragic events that disrupt our lives,
The ethos we maintain in the aftermath has immense power.
Exactly. Willie Dale's simple philosophy of treating people with dignity on their worst days echoed forward to protect and guide people he would never live to meet.
I want to thank you so much for taking this journey with us today. While it is a heavy, somber topic, understanding the complex, often hidden human realities behind the uniform is incredibly important.
We've talked a lot today about the legacy of those on the front lines and the ripples of their actions. But considering Kathy's experience, isolated, pregnant, and fundamentally altered by an event she never asked to be part of, it leaves you with a different angle to mull over.
It really does.
In our own lives, regardless of our chosen professions or our driving ambitions, who are the silent partners acting as the involuntary shock absorbers for our choices?
It makes you wonder, what unseen costs are the people closest to you quietly carrying right now to support the path you've chosen to walk?